And we're in. Frank, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, and it's nice to see you. We had a delightful lunch several months ago.
We did. It's been a wild ride actually. Like it's been the last few months have kind of been crazy.
Uh-huh. Well, do you recall why I wished to have lunch with you?
I know you wanted to have lunch with me because you wanted to kind of walk me through what my podcast was, and then kind of vet me a little bit to make sure, like, I was actually doing a real business or a real job, kind of interviewing people and getting to know people on the podcast.
Exactly. I wanted to interview the interviewer and make sure I'd feel comfortable
Right.
on your podcast. And as soon as we sat down and started sharing stories and I learned more about you, I felt very comfortable. And I've been looking forward to making this appearance.
That's great. That's amazing. I'm so glad you said that actually, because I think you're number 160 or 158 or something. And I've only had one podcast where someone left like kind of angry.
Well, hopefully I won't be the second.
Hopefully not. We'll be fine. But yeah, no, it's been a good run and I've had amazing guests and I'm incredibly thankful for your time.
My pleasure.
So look, we have a lot to get through. You have seen filmmaking in this city for your entire career, starting at USC. We're going to try to get into all of it. Also, kind of take a temperature of what's going on today. But maybe we can just go back to like the very beginning. So, like, where are you from?
Well, I'm from Rocky River, Ohio, which is a suburb of Cleveland on the west side.
Mhm.
And while I was in high school, I developed an interest in filmmaking. And my father had bought for me a Super 8 millimeter camera and a projector and a tape recorder. What more does one need to start shooting films?
Yeah.
And I shot family events. I shot documentaries and shorts, I suppose you would say. And I just had a lot of fun and found that I had a creative bent
Mhm.
to my personality and what I liked to do. And it was a wonderful hobby.
Mhm.
And in high school, I approached some of my teachers because Rocky River High School had a very progressive curriculum, meaning interesting classes such as satire and social protest, creative writing, film study. And these were electives that one could take their junior and senior years. And I found that those classes appealed to me and my teacher, who was very kind and innovative, allowed me to make films in place of term papers.
Oh, that's a great deal.
Oh, I had fun,
Yeah.
and I put together these short films. Some of them were narrative, dramatic. Others were more um, in the space of being documentaries.
Hmm.
And, I would shoot them, I would edit them, I'd put sound to them, and just sync up a tape recorder, play back the soundtrack against the edited film, projected in class, and then the, teacher and, students would, discuss it with me and, ask questions about how I went about it and what I was trying to say with the particular films.
Mhm.
And, it was just a nice way to be able to, enjoy being creative in high school. I never expected that I would turn an avocation into a vocation. I started college at a small school in Pennsylvania, Allegheny College, and I expected to study political science and then attend law school and uh, step into my father's footsteps. He practiced law in Cleveland and was very successful, and he was hopeful that I would do the same.
Hmm. what was it like being able to go to a high school where they kind of respected your passion for filmmaking? Because that's really rare. And especially like in a suburb outside of Cleveland, Ohio, it's not like you were in Los Angeles and all the kids of all the, all their parents are in the industry somehow. Like you're in Cleveland, Ohio, and all of a sudden people are saying like, wow, you're really passionate about filmmaking. Instead of doing term papers, why don't you make a film and then we'll all watch it? And then to have that audience feedback at such a young age, that
Well,
must have been incredible.
well, it really came down to the teaching staff at Rocky River High being, embracing the notion of someone making films
Mhm.
instead of writing papers. And a couple of my teachers appeared in the films. They were good sports, and we had fun. And it's a nice way to remember them now because I still have those films. Um, but you're right. It was unique, a great opportunity, and I'm thankful for it.
Yeah, I mean, just at such an early age to get that kind of like reward for putting in the effort to make a film. Like like not enough people maybe get that. Well, maybe nowadays people get it because we post on social media or we post on YouTube and we get instant feedback. But back in the day when you're using Super 8s and turning that like hobby into something that you can share and actually get credit for at school,
Yes.
that's incredible.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean, even in my generation, we're at least like a few years apart. Like we didn't have anything like that at our high school AV club, and what we couldn't get credit or anything like that for participating and making films and stuff. But there was always one guy who was out there like filming the basketball games and filming the football games. But I don't think he got any credit, and we never got to see his work. That's so cool.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, okay, so you went to a small college in Pennsylvania, political science, and then law school, following the footsteps of your father. How did you get to Los Angeles?
Well, so I had a nice freshman year, and then I was into my sophomore year, and this was way back in the day, around 1977, that I recall a blustery winter day when, on top of what was already on the ground, 38 inches of snow fell in one dropping.
That's kind of biblical.
And there was an oil crisis at the time.
Right. Yeah.
And the governor of Pennsylvania called up the president of the college and said, "Hey, listen, we're having a shortage in Pennsylvania of, the use of oil for heating. Would you mind cutting back by not heating the classroom buildings?" So I waded through this, 4 feet of snow practically, and my jeans were soaking wet by the time I got to the classroom. And I'm sitting in class, and it's so cold, and the professor has a long winter coat and a scarf on. And as he's lecturing, vapor is coming out of his mouth.
Just popping out.
Oh my God. And I said, "There's something wrong with this picture." So, the bell could not ring soon enough. I put on my boots, and I walked across campus to the library where they had a college catalog section because Allegheny offered what was called a visiting student program. So for your junior year, you could go away and take classes at another school, perhaps a university that, offered far more classes than this small liberal arts college.
Or just something in a warmer climate?
Bingo. So I picked out the college catalogs for schools in Florida, Arizona, and California. And I liked the propaganda that USC put out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Warm sunshine.
Oh, yes. And they had a great catalog. And, I leafed through it and I found that they had this wonderful film school.
Mhm.
And so it clicked that, perhaps instead of studying political science, film might be something I would be interested in.
Mhm.
And So I applied and was accepted at USC, and I initially came out here on a visiting student program where I was going to take classes my junior year and return to Allegheny for my senior year, and all the credits that I had earned at USC would be accepted at Allegheny. Well, within 2 weeks of being out here, Ryan,
You cut Philadelphia, you cut Pennsylvania out.
I knew,
You knew.
I knew. And I was very fortunate because I met some amazing guys who became lifelong friends
Mhm.
who were in the film program. And we established a friendship and later in life, a working relationship.
Mhm. That's wonderful. So, okay, so you're in high school and you've got your Super 8 and you're showing your films to in your classes and you're getting feedback and stuff like that. Then you go to this small college in Pennsylvania. Were you still filming those first 2 years at the Pennsylvania college while you were doing poli sci?
No,
No.
but I took the films with me and I showed them to some of my friends
Yeah.
at Allegheny, and they were impressed and, liked what they had seen. And, but no, I kind of curtailed that.
Because at that time, there's no real pathway to getting into film and television or getting into the creative arts from like, a small town in Pennsylvania. Like you really do. At that time, you probably had to be in New York or LA. So I was just curious if you'd kept up with that filmmaking. And then how amazing was it that you got, this terrible day of weather and you're like, okay, I need to get to Southern California as quickly as possible.
Exactly. And so I came out and I started taking film classes, and they were introductory classes. And um, within, months, I was ready to make application. And fortunately, I was admitted into the film school at USC.
Hmm.
And I really uh, enjoyed it because the professors were so amazing. They were either former industry professionals who became, academics and had hands-on knowledge of, from their experiences in the film industry, or they were adjunct professors, meaning they were still working in the film industry and after work came and taught classes at USC.
Hmm.
So it was a wonderful experience. And the film school there at the time was um, located in old stables, horse stables that had been converted into offices and had a quad.
Hmm.
And it's so interesting because it was very, nitty gritty. You really felt almost like you were hanging out at a studio. Kids would, meet in the quad and talk with other kids and run into professors. And it was something that was very kind of creative and just a kind of a magical place. In fact, when George Lucas designed Skywalker Ranch, he had the quad replicated
Hmm.
up in Northern California.
That's right, because Lucas and Spielberg both went to USC, didn't they? Yeah.
Well, Lucas did.
Yeah. That's incredible, isn't it?
Yes. Well, and I want to tell you a little bit about some extracurricular activities while I was at USC, because I think your audience will be interested and get a laugh.
All right, let's hear it.
So, two friends that I made, we'll call them George and Les, were fearless, meaning they were very, very comfortable going up to people and talking to them on campus. And by that, I mean, there was a show that was shooting on the USC campus called The Paper Chase with the fine actor John Houseman playing Professor Kingsley.
Mhm.
And it was about law school. So naturally, they needed a university to shoot at, and they picked USC. So you'd be walking from your, class back to the dorm, and you would see them around campus shooting. And George and Les and I, but primarily it was George and Les, would approach like the extras that were hanging out and, have conversations with them and then some of the crew. And they even approached the director and became, friends with the director. And because those two were so comfortable doing that, I also became, because I was a little shy, more confident. And we started doing some interesting things together on like Friday afternoons when, we were finished with classes. We would, George and Les and I would call up the studio switchboards for, let's say, Universal or 20th Century Fox. And we would ask to be put through to the guard gates, at the main gate to drive onto the lot.
Hmm.
And, we would say that we were one of the executives, at the studio, and that, our son was coming over with a friend or two to have lunch. And the security at the time was not as sophisticated as it is today. So we sounded like we knew what we were doing, and they bought into it.
Wow.
We never had a problem getting onto a lot. And so we would go onto the lots, and there would be the pass waiting at the main gate, and we'd drive on, and then we'd park, and we'd walk around from stage to stage, or if they were shooting exteriors at the studio, and we just hang out and watch and meet people.
Yeah.
And it was fun, and it was educational.
I bet.
Yeah.
Especially for film school students.
And then we found out that there were what were called academy screenings on the lots at the time of award season.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the studios, were very anxious to have Academy members see their films and, of course, vote for them. So they'd advertise in the trades, which were Daily Variety and Hollywood Reporter at the time. And it would say, Academy screening tonight, 20th Century Fox for Alien,
Oh, wow.
okay, or Deer Hunter at MGM. Okay. So, it was like an invitation, and we would just show up and say, "Oh, uh, our dad is in the academy, and he said it would be okay if we, came and saw the Deer Hunter tonight." And they would allow us right in.
That's
Never
amazing.
had a problem. So sometimes we were seeing 3 films a week at the various studios, which at the time were Columbia,
Mhm.
Warner Brothers on the Burbank lot, MGM, 20th Century Fox, Paramount, and Universal. And I remember going to a screening on the Paramount lot and with a buddy, and the house lights dim, and the legendary Mae West came in to the theater. It was Paramount. And she had 2 guys on each arm that escorted her down, and there she was, Mae West.
Wow.
Another time we went to a screening, um, of a film called The Awakening, and we waited until the theater was, dark and the film was about to roll. We finally found a couple of seats up front. And my friend George looked at me as the first reel rolled, and he said, "Oh no, not another mummy movie." Well, the film ends and the house lights come on, and there is a huge round of applause. And we turn around, and sitting right behind us is the star of The Awakening, Charlton Heston.
Wow. That is so incredible for someone at a young age to have those experiences and to be around. Although, like when you were going to those lots and just kind of snooping around and checking everything out and absorbing it all, and then having a chance to go to those screenings and sit in front of Charlton Heston, like, did your mind click and be like, "Wow, like I can do this. Like I can be part of this. Like I'm gonna make a career here."
What I thought was, "We're not in Kansas anymore,
Not in
Dorothy."
Ohio, not in Ohio anymore, or small town Pennsylvania.
Um,
Mm.
so it was exciting. You couldn't drive down the street without seeing a film crew shooting Los Angeles. Um, all the networks had primetime series such as Charlie's Angels, Dallas, Dynasty that shot, either on the lot or shot around town. And it was just an exciting time to see the the bustling film and television industry at work and thriving.
Mhm. Those are, I mean, those days are gone.
Well,
I mean, I drive around this town. I've been here now 2 years. I drive around this town all the I never see a movie being made.
sadly,
Yeah.
there has been a flight from first Los Angeles to other states that offered incentives that
Mhm.
are attractive to producers. So Albuquerque, New Mexico, Atlanta, Georgia, um,
Canada. Mm,
New Orleans, Louisiana,
mhm,
obviously Vancouver and Toronto, for the economic advantages of shooting there.
mhm,
Um, these days, producers, studios, streamers are going overseas.
mhm.
It- The amount of international production activity is staggering, and it's been very difficult for, working crew and cast in Los Angeles. But, we must all adapt and, find our way forward.
Mhm.
But it's changed quite a lot since what I was describing back in the day.
So you're 21, you're 22 years old, you're going to USC during the day, and then at night you're moonlighting as a studio executive son at a premiere or at an academy screening. You're driving around town, surrounded by the magic of Hollywood. I mean, that must have just inspired you to no end.
What it did is it gave me confidence to have attended USC, and I graduated in 1981. I spent the first 6 months after graduation sleeping on friends' couches and not being able to get arrested to get a job. It was very difficult,
Mm.
and it was a soul-searching time, you know? "Okay, I'm out of film school. How do I get my first gig?" And everyone faces that,
Mhm.
and for some, takes longer than others. I was very fortunate because I found my first job, and it was a good one.
So 6 months of couch surfing, as we like to call it. I mean, and a lot of soul searching. I mean, what were your parents saying at this stage? Were they telling you to come back to Ohio? Were they telling you, you go back to law school? Because, it's one thing to leave your family, come out to California, go to film school, leave everyone behind, and then also to graduate and then not be able to have a job right away. Like your parents must have been worried. Like what were that was that kind of chirping in the back of your brain?
You're spot on. Were you there?
I wasn't,
Hearing those conversations?
but I know how it goes.
Oh, it was tough.
Yeah.
And, There was a lot of skepticism that I could make a career out of it. And I think that my parents were very worried and concerned. And, that continued for a while. Even after I started getting work, sometimes when you go from project to project, it takes time
Yeah.
before the next one comes along.
Yeah, we're all just freelancing out here, right? You might work for 6 months straight, and then you might have 6 months off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's terrifying to parents that are worried about their kids and all this kind of stuff. I imagine, like, because you're not the first film and television professional to have sat in this chair in this studio. So I've heard a few of these stories, and people have come from all over the United States to Los Angeles, to be part of this dream, this dream factory, and it's always the parents who are back home wondering, like, do they have a roof over their head? Do they have enough money for dinner? Can they pay the rent? When's their next job? And of course, they don't know how the industry works. So they're constantly worried all the time. And of course, you have this in the back of your brain that your parents are always worried about you. It makes it even more difficult.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what was your first job like? Like, were you a production assistant, or were you like a PA, or, what did that first entry point look like for you?
Back in the day, the trades, which were Daily Variety, Hollywood Reporter, as I mentioned,
Hmm.
had a classifieds section in each. And occasionally you would find a job offering for a film project. And I responded to one that was for a production assistant. And I called. A nice lady answered the phone, and she said that the producer was out of town shooting scouting locations, and she wanted to take down information about me. So she asked a series of questions, and we struck up a very nice conversation, and she liked me. And so on the index card that she was taking the notes, she wrote, "Seems like a nice guy."
That's so sweet.
Do you know how I know that?
You saw it eventually when you got hired?
And I kept the card.
That's brilliant. What a keepsake.
Well, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I waited to hear her back, and I didn't get a phone call. Like a week went by,
Hmm.
maybe a week and a half. And it's like the summer. And I had, graduated in February. I was a mid-year graduate. And my friend, George, the fearless one, encouraged me to make another call to them.
Hmm.
You know, don't wait, Frank. Pick up the phone and call.
What was industry standard back then? Like, obviously you can't call every day. Like, do you call like once and then wait a month, or do you call once and wait a week? Like, because now we have email and everything like that. Communication's much more fluid and frequent. But like when you're actually making phone calls, I mean, what was that like? I mean,
Well, I was shy,
yeah.
and that was part of it.
Hmm.
And, I had to, step up my game, you might say, and I picked up the phone, and a week and a half later called, and she answered, this nice lady who happened to be the wife of the producer,
Even better.
and her name, Jackie,
Mhm.
and she remembered me, and her husband, Paul, was back in town, and so we scheduled a meeting. And I went in and I told him about all my experience at USC. He knew I had no industry experience whatsoever, but he was interested in me. And after meeting him, I was definitely interested in the project. It sounded amazing. It was a sword and sorcery action film with animal action, as well as lots of special effects and swashbuckling sword play. And it was entitled The Beastmaster.
Mhm.
And he and his partner, Don, wrote the screenplay. and they found financing. And they had been very successful in their career with other films, including one entitled Phantasm, which was a horror film that became a franchise and a cult classic and still watched today and viewed as one of the, great horror films of the 1970s.
Mhm.
And so Paul was the producer, looked at me across the table and he said, "Hey, Frank, we'd like to hire you." And I go, "That's great. How much, will you be paying me?" And he goes, 55. And I go, $55 a day? And he goes, "No, $55 per week. We think that will be enough to cover your lunch and your gas."
Oh, wow. Just enough to survive. Forget about rent.
Well, so on Phantasm, they found people that were willing to put in the sweat equity in order to gain experience. And they were basically viewing this, which was going to be done on a much bigger budget than Phantasm, as being an opportunity for someone young like me with no experience in the industry other than having gone to film school. And I viewed it that way as well, meaning people pay a lot of money to go to grad school, don't they?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And so I thought to myself, well, this is an opportunity for me to work on a good sized independent film and gain experience and learn. So for me, it was a no brainer. And I started, and they realized that I was a hard worker and that I had some skills.
Mhm.
I was learning, but I had skills that I was bringing to the table. So they put me in charge of doing some, interesting things. I did the first production board on strips, which is the shooting schedule, and laid out a shooting schedule that was, preliminary, but that was useful during pre-production. I was asked to look for makeup special effects leads to do the prosthetics that they wanted to get going on very early. They asked me to, call directors of photography and get their reels, because the only way that you could look at a potential director of photography's work was to call either their representative or get through to them directly and get a 35 millimeter print of something they had shot. And then you had to book time at like a screening room in Hollywood. And a fellow named Roberto and I were put in charge of screening these reels and then giving our recommendations to Paul and Don, the
Mhm.
director. And amazingly, we settled on someone whose reel we did not have to screen,
Hmm.
a man named John Alcott, who had shot Barry Lyndon and won an Academy Award. He was Stanley Kubrick's
Oh,
director of photography on all of Stanley Kubrick's films. Um, And he was working in the US on projects that were independent because he enjoyed it, and it was a way of earning when he wasn't working for Stanley and at Pinewood Studios. And we got through to him, and he agreed to come on as the director of photography. And he shot the Beastmaster, and it's beautiful because of his talents. And I was fortunate to be able to be on set and see him light, and he used candles for close-ups, to get the kind of lighting that was, really special and beautiful, stunning.
mhm.
Well,
You learned all the tricks of the trade.
well, I got to see some really talented professionals work on the Beastmaster. And Don and Paul were just amazing because I didn't tell you this, but, I, got some promotions. So I replaced someone that was hired to be the assistant to the producer who had more experience than me, but I replaced that person because that person didn't work out. And so my salary went up from $55 a week to $250 a week, which was a little more respectable.
Your parents must have been happy.
Oh, they were happy, and I was able to pay the rent.
Yeah. Big steps.
Yeah, but I worked on the Beastmaster for a year and a half. We had a lengthy pre-production period, and then we had a lengthy shoot, and we probably employed every stuntman in Hollywood at the time who could ride horses and do the amazing stunt action that was required. And the animals, we had amazing animal trainer named Boone Nar, who oversaw all of the work that was done with, the tiger, the ferrets, the eagle, which were the fighting force of the lead character. That's what made the Beastmaster unique and interesting, is that this swashbuckling um, star, played by Marc Singer, utilized this coterie of animals as his fighting force.
And did that shoot all in LA?
It did,
Yeah.
with the exception of some work that we did in Nevada to get some of the vistas and beautiful, panoramic shots.
Hmm. Wow. And that was your first project walking into something like that. And I love the fact that you kind of accepted basically being an unpaid intern with gas money to then working your way up the ladder to getting like a proper salary.
It's called paying one's dues.
I love that. That's amazing. That's such a great story. And the fact it took you like 6 months to land it and you kind of stuck with it. It's such a beautiful kind of coming of age.
The really wonderful outcome is that I developed a lifelong friendship with Don Coscarelli, the director, and Paul Pepperman, the producer. We still get together and have lunch.
Hmm.
We um, ha- developed a very nice friendship. And the Beastmaster became a bit of a cult classic. Well, first of all, it was one of Ted Turner's favorite films. So he played it all the time
That's helpful.
on TBS.
Yeah.
And um, there have been re-releases on special DVDs, made by various companies that, like, on the 30-year anniversary of a film or a 40-year anniversary of a film, to bring it out again with a special DVD release. And they did um, one DVD was devoted to interviews with the cast that were in The Beastmaster: Marc Singer, Tanya Roberts,
Mm.
and John Amos. And they interviewed, of course, Don and Paul. And Don and Paul asked me if I would sit for an interview.
Oh, wow.
So even though that was my first film, it's the film that keeps on giving. And I have the opportunity to, be on that special presentation of the 40-year release of The Beastmaster. And it meant a lot to me to be able to weigh in and tell some stories like I've just told you.
And you were 23, 24?
I was 23 and turned 24.
Wow.
And what an opportunity that was.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's such a great Hollywood story.
Uh-huh.
So so you're in this legendary film, The Beastmaster. You're making lifelong friendships with the directors and the producers. Obviously, you know, you you paid your dues to get your foot in the door, and then you just took advantage of everything. You just absorbed everything. You learned quickly. You're obviously a hard worker. You got to a point where everyone kind of on set respected you. And then what happens when the Beastmaster ends?
So, it's a good question, and in fact, I wanna just kind of, put a little button on the Beastmaster story and then segue into the next, chapter of my career.
Okay.
I learned early on about loyalty. Um, Paul and Don had some disagreements with the executive producer who had, in essence, brought in the financing and therefore, carried some weight.
Mhm.
And early on in production, there was a bit of a breach of their relationship, meaning the executive producer disagreed with some of the things that Don was trying to do creatively and doing well. He didn't see it that way. And it caused Don to think about whether he could work with this executive producer. And I don't think that they were ever truly serious about leaving, but when emotions are flying high, I remember being in a closed door meeting and it was just the three of us. And Don was lamenting this poor treatment that he felt he was receiving, which was unjustifiable in my mind and everybody else's, except the executive producers. And he said, I don't know if I want to stay on under these conditions. And I looked at him and I looked at Paul and I said, Don, if you go, I go.
Wow.
Oh, well, you know, Paul kind of let out a little bit of a chuckle and he goes, Frank, that'll show him.
You're carrying some big weight, clearly.
Well, but the point is, that's how I felt.
Mhm.
Even though this was such a great opportunity for me, I felt a strong allegiance to these two awesome guys, who were the true talents behind making the Beastmaster.
Mhm.
And there was a little bit of disrespect shown. And I would have gone if they would have said, no, we're not putting up with this.
Mhm.
But fortunately, Don and Paul stayed on, and it was a challenging experience, especially for Don.
Mhm.
But the film turned out very well. It's something I'm very proud of. It was acquired by MGM, and the guy at the time running MGM, who had a little bit of a, well, you might say spotted career, David Beagleman.
Mhm.
Well, at a certain point when post-production finished, the executive producer planned to go to Europe and spend some time there, and he needed someone to kind of stay in touch with MGM, which was making its plans to release the film in August, and it was a month or two away, and he needed someone to represent him and make sure that all of the issues and matters related to delivery of the film and the publicity of the for the film was attended to. And he liked me, even though he knew I was Don and Paul's guy. And he asked me to stay on and help manage the delivery to MGM.
Mhm.
And I went to Paul and Don and I said, well, he wants me to stay on. What do you think? And they go, absolutely.
Mm.
Oh, then we'll have somebody on the inside.
That's great.
So, Ryan, loyalty. It's so important in building relationships, and it became a tenet of my career. And it taught me early on about the importance of it and how that can really solidify a relationship and lead to some good things in the future.
Do you think? That's beautiful, by the way, and that's such a great story, and it's so nice that you were. I mean, it's nice that you didn't do it because of that, but it's nice that you were rewarded for that loyalty. And I'm just curious because like you see so little of that these days of people willing to band together at the arms and go into battle together and filmmake and stay together through thick and thin. And I just find those stories are so touching, especially at such a young age.
I understand what you have just said,
Mm.
which is that you perceive or you have observed that there's less of it. But I have found that the really good quality people in our business still have it
Oh,
and
that's nice.
still show it.
Yeah. That's really good to hear.
Hmm.
I'm glad there's still a small circle of it that exists, and if those people are the people working at a high level, then we all need to learn from it.
Yes.
Yeah. So did you take the job with MGM, or did you stay with the guys? Because they're working on a per project basis, and maybe with MGM it would have been like a full-time job. So like, was that the decision?
I never worked for MGM.
Okay.
Okay. I did things for the production company and the executive producer that were meant to, in essence, facilitate the delivery and the release of the film
Okay.
by MGM.
Okay.
For example, I went on um, a publicity tour with the star Marc Singer. We, in the weekend of the release of the film, traveled down to San Diego and did the rounds of appearances on, local talk shows and news programs. And I had actually kept one of the baby ferrets which pop up at the end of the film in the climactic scene with Marc Singer and Tanya Roberts coming over this beautiful, majestic landscape in Valley of Sun, Nevada. And one of the ferrets that had been in throughout the film unfortunately perished, and you felt very sad because of that for the ferret that perished. But out of Marc Singer's little saddlebag pops these two little cute ferrets, so you know that they are, the offspring. And Paul kept one, and I kept one.
That's
So
cute.
I had a pet ferret for a while. And I took the ferret on this publicity tour with Mark,
Hmm.
and I would be in like the green room with Mark, and I was, holding the ferret. And Mark and I would be chatting as we waited for Mark to go on, you know, and appear on the shows. And I would, prep Mark with little bits of information like, Mark, did you know that the ancient Egyptians made pets out of ferrets? And did you know that the word ferret is derived from the Latin root ferretus, which means little fur thief?
I love the fact that you're coming out of university, you've got no job, then you get this great job with Beastmaster, and then you're doing a press tour with the star.
Oh my goodness, it was so wonderful. And Mark was just a charming guy, smart,
Mhm.
hardworking, and he did a great job in the Beastmaster. And I enjoyed working with him and admired him. And so it was fun when we got to go on the press tour. And then he would go out on stage and they would be interviewing him, and he'd say, yes, ferret is derived from the Latin root ferretus, which means little fur thief. I,
Just hitting all your lines. That's fantastic. Isn't it so nice when you're feeding people the lines and then you hear them back on stage?
yes, it's flattering.
Yes. Wow. What a great time. What a great time in filmmaking too, right? That was early '80s.
It was an exciting time. And, to have the opportunity to work on that film and see how a sword and sorcery action adventure film with stunts, practical effects, visual effects at the time, which were rather primitive, and pyrotechnics, meaning blowing up things and burning things that were, during the battle scenes, and um, the amazing stunt work that was done. And then, of course, the craftsmanship of, John Alcott's beautiful photography. It was a great learning experience. I paid my dues and I was rewarded because even though during production I was probably referred to as the assistant to the producer, they wanted Paul and Don wanted to do something nice for me. So they said, Frank, we can't give you associate producer credit because that's already accorded to someone, but we're going to call you the assistant producer, and we're going to put your credit in a very prominent position in the end titles. So they did that for me as a way of saying thank you, and it became helpful for my next projects, which I'll tell you about.
That's fantastic. That's great that they put you in the credits and kind of created a position for you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's beautiful. So how did you spin the next job out of that?
Okay. So the way it's supposed to work, Ryan, and you likely know this, is you work on a project and you demonstrate your skills and your responsibility and what you can bring to the project and how you can help be an asset. And I made a nice friendship with a fellow named Jim Sabardalati, who was the first assistant director on The Beastmaster. And Jim had worked for Roger Corman,
Mhm.
who is a legendary producer. He recently passed away after living a long life and accumulating a library of titles that he either directed early on in his career or later produced. He did it all. He arranged the financing. He had a studio in Venice, where he didn't want to pay the $500 to take down the sign that was in front of his studio, which said Hammond Lumber, because it was going to cost $500. And he figured, well, why spend it, you know? And it causes people not to really know that there's a film studio, so they're not going to sneak in and try to take, you know, equipment and props and things. So he left the sign up. But long story short, Roger um, was legendary for um, finding talent. And I'm talking primarily about directors such as Martin Scorsese, Jonathan Demme, actors such as Sylvester Stallone, um, and giving them opportunities to work, direct, produce, star for very little money, but opportunities just the same.
Mm.
And Roger had been approached shortly after I was, delivering Beastmaster to helping deliver Beastmaster to MGM. Roger was approached by an Argentine production services company called Ares Cinematographica, located in Buenos Aires. And they said, listen, we can bring tremendous production value to films because, well, things cost less in Argentina and the dollar is very strong relative to the Argentine currency, the peso. And we would love to get into business with you, Roger, to do a series of Argentine-American co-productions, which will be American films. They'll be from scripts that you have written and with personnel that you send down to Argentina to principally make the films, but utilizing our crews, our studio, our um, the props and wardrobe and sets that we can build for very little money, but that will look grand and impressive. And so Roger, wanting to capitalize on the success of sword and sorcery films such as Conan the Barbarian, The Sword and Sorcerer, and The Beastmaster, approached Jim Sabartolotti, who had been the first assistant director on The Beastmaster, who had worked for Roger before, and said, "Jim, listen, I'd like you to direct the first film that we do down in Argentina, but I'll need to send someone that can handle the production chores with you, an American producer. Do you know anybody? And and especially someone that has had sword and sorcery experience like you have."
Yeah, exactly.
And so Jim thought of me and he offered me the opportunity to work with him on the first one. And he introduced me to Roger. And it was a Friday evening and it was late. It was probably 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening. And it was early or mid-November of 1982. And Jim and I go to Roger's office, and we're sitting in his office on um, San Vicente in Brentwood. And he had the company New World Pictures at the time. And Roger is very proper, Stanford educated, and just brilliant. And he sits down with us and he asks me about my experience on the Beastmaster, and I tell him all about what I had done. And you know, he's very gracious and listening, and um, the interview is going quite well. And then he says, "Well, Frank, can you speak Spanish?" And I say, "Oh, sure. I took a couple of semesters of Spanish at USC," which I had,
Mhm.
but I never had expected to have to use it. It was just a, course requirement for, my particular major. You had to have a little bit of a foreign language. So I took Spanish.
Mhm.
Okay. And I kind of skated through the classes, Ryan, if you know what I mean.
Kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so I say, "Oh yeah, I can speak some Spanish." And he goes, "Oh, okay. Well then tell me in Spanish that," and the first film was entitled Death Stalker. And he goes, "Tell me in Spanish, Frank, Death Stalker is going to make a lot of money all over the world." And I thought, holy moly. I had no idea where to begin.
You've been called out.
Just then, the phone rings and his assistant says, Roger, it's Sherwood Schwartz on the line for you." And of course, Roger has to take this call from this legendary television producer, Sherwood Schwartz. And while Roger takes the call, Jim is coaching me. Okay. And he basically tells me, "Frank, you've got to say El Cazador de la Muerte se va a ganar mucho plata en todo el mundo." And I'm trying to remember that. And then Roger's call ends and he comes back and he sits down and he says, "Let's see, where were we? Oh, yes, you're going to tell me that Deathstalker is going to make lots of money around the world." And I go, "El Cazador de la Muerte se va a ganar mucho plata en todo el mundo," parroting what Jim had coached me to say.
Mhm.
And Roger goes, "That's fine. You have the job."
Oh, Jesus.
And he said, I am going to make you the associate producer on the first film, Deathstalker. If you do a good job, then I will make you the full producer on the next one, which we're going to shoot back to back. And that one, entitled The Warrior and the Sorceress, is going to be teed up. And the notion is, as Roger's explaining, we're going to amortize the costs, meaning the Argentine company is going to build these amazing sets. They're going to, from scratch, manufacture wardrobe and provide extras in the thousands that you can use over the course of production. There are going to be custom prop swords and shields, and there's going to be all sorts of opportunities then to repurpose them for the next film, which Roger was brilliant at.
Mhm.
And it's the way in which he was able to produce films on low budgets and maximize the production value.
That's brilliant. And you're getting to ride along on this great dream, and you get to bump up your responsibility on each film. It's win-win.
Well, so um, I called home to let my parents know that I had been offered this opportunity. And my father, a rather, conservative man, fine attorney that he was, but very concerned about his son's safety, said, "You are going down to Argentina to make your next films?" And he hung up on me.
Oh, shit.
And I didn't know what to say or do.
Mhm.
I just waited in my small studio apartment. And finally, the phone rang again. And he goes, "Frank, I've given this some thought and I've discussed it with Mary Lou. And she reminded me that you are being offered an opportunity at your age that men twice your age are not being offered or are not doing."
Mhm.
And so he recognized the opportunity, and then he told me, "And by the way, you have family in Argentina."
Oh, really?
Yeah. So half of his um, father and mother's family, meaning the sisters of his mother and father, went down to Argentina and half came to the United States. So when I arrived in Argentina, I found I had 100 cousins
Oh, wow.
in Buenos Aires, and many of them were my age. And
Mhm.
so we hung out together on the weekends and had fun, and we've stayed in touch, and they've become lifelong cousins and friends. And that's a beautiful outcome as well, to traveling halfway around the world or to the bottom of South America to make movies.
Mhm.
But it was an interesting time in Argentina,
Oh, the Falkland Islands.
had just occurred.
Mm.
And so what that meant is that the war between Argentina and England had culminated, and it was a terrible loss for Argentina. They were just smashed by the strength of the um, British military, the Air Force, and soldiers on the ground that landed on the Malvinas, which are also called the Falkland Islands. And I stepped off the plane, the first American on the ground to make this first movie, meaning I went down alone and I was the first to arrive. And the Argentine production company, my co-producers, Hector Oliveira and Alejandro Cesa, thought it would be a nice thing if I was greeted at the gate by an Air Force general. Now, the military junta was still in power.
Right. So
Okay,
that would have been, yeah.
they had assumed power and had been in power for years, and they did some bad things. There were atrocities, the missing people, and they were called the desaparecidos.
That disappeared.
They disappeared. And um, so, I didn't know what to make of it when this Air Force general greets me. And, I'm 24 years old at the time and, hadn't, as you pointed out, traveled a lot internationally. And it was a big deal. I mean, I was a little nervous when this Air Force general approached me. I didn't know what that they had arranged for him to escort me through Ezeiza Airport to baggage claim where they were waiting for me. But he was very nice, the general. And when I met my co-producers, we immediately established a working relationship that also turned into a friendship. And they were delightful to work with and such great guys. And it was just such a wonderful experience being down there at an exciting time when the people of Argentina were angry at the military for what had happened in the years preceding with the disappeared and whatnot. And they demanded a free election, a democratic election. And it was held when I first got down there. And a new president, Raul Alfonsine, was elected. And you could see in the people's eyes the collective relief that there was going to be a democratic form of government, not a military junta ruling them, where there were soldiers on every other street corner in Buenos Aires with machine guns. Okay. It was very safe as a result. You could walk around and you never had to worry about any sort of crime because nobody was going to misbehave with, soldiers on the streets. But it was also not normal. It was unnatural to see that. And um, with what's going on in the United States right now, it's reminiscent in some ways. And I remember when the inauguration of Raul Alfonsine took place and the people marched through the streets of Buenos Aires in celebration. It was just such a beautiful thing to see and an exciting time to be down there.
That's so amazing that not like you've kind of spun your film experience into also like witnessing these great moments in history. People, when you join this industry, it's funny. A lot of people tell me like, you either take a conventional career path, like your father wanted for you, political science, law, or you join the circus. And the circus is very much, the creative arts, right? And when you join the circus, first you got to get your foot in the door, but you have no idea where it's going to take you from there. And you just kind of you take opportunity after opportunity, and you might end up here, you might end up there. You just don't know. You give yourself to the process. And the fact that you ended up in Argentina to work on these co-productions at the same time when the military junta is converting, back into a democratically elected government, and you're getting to witness like your political science brain must have just been on fire because you're like, holy shit, I studied all this stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the icing on the cake was the wonderful relationships that I established with cousins I had no idea existed. And we're still in touch and we still see each other occasionally. And my wife and son and daughter and I traveled to Argentina for my wife's birthday. And they were there for the celebration of her birthday. We threw a party, and it was such a great reunion to be with them
Mhm.
and to meet their kids now. Because some of my cousins who were my age, meaning in our mid 20s, are now my age, but they have kids that are in their mid-20s and early 30s. This is in a similar manner that my wife and I do. So the next generations got to meet, and I'm certain we'll continue to stay in touch.
That's beautiful that not only that, amazing work opportunity led you to being an associate producer, but also reconnecting with long lost family.
So let me tell you briefly, because I know you want to cover my career, and I think we're um, well into this podcast. But let me just tell you briefly about some of my experiences on the films that were done in Argentina.
Okay, great.
Okay. So on the second film, which was called The Warrior and the Sorceress, I was so excited. David Carradine, who had just come off the Kung Fu television series, which was
Huge.
enormously popular. Okay. Well, he had done another film with Roger called Boxcar Bertha, and it was a good film. And it was a great experience for David working with Roger and Roger working with David. So David was eager to do a sword and sorcery film where he could show off his skills in martial arts as well as with sword play. So he agreed to do the second one. So for me, producing a film with David Carradine was very exciting.
Yeah.
Okay. So David and I established a nice, working relationship. He realized I was young, but he knew that I had had the experience on the Beastmaster and on Deathstalker. And so um, he liked me and I liked him. The second day of principal photography, we finished and we were back at the hotel, which was a country club, actually, that was near the studio where the producers, Argentine producers, arranged for us to stay, which was a wonderful situation to be at a beautiful country club that was 10 minutes from the studio. Well, I was getting ready for dinner and a porter knocked on the door. And I said, yes. And he said, Señor Frank, tenemos una problema con Señor David. And so I had to follow him down to David's room. And David had had a little bit of an accident. And his right wrist was broken. And the two bones in his hand were broken in his fingers. And we found the finest hand surgeon in Buenos Aires who did a brilliant job, but he had to have a cast put on. Obviously, we couldn't shoot the next day, and I had to make a call to Roger. And this is my third film in the industry and my first film as producer. And the thing about Roger Corman, he was very thrifty. That's how he was able to produce films on low budgets and make a lot of money. And so when an international phone call occurred, you had to be very short, what one might say.
Very precise.
Correct. So Roger goes, yes, Frank. And I go, Roger, in a incident unrelated to the filming of the movie, David injured his right wrist. It's fractured, and the bones in his two middle fingers are fractured as well. And he has a cast up to his elbow. And there's a short pause. And then Roger says, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, Roger, perhaps we could shut down for a week and you can recast and we can make an insurance claim. And he said, absolutely not. First of all, I never pay for cast insurance. Secondly, I have pre-sold this film in key foreign territories based upon the strength of David's name. What are you going to do?
Oh, shit.
And I said, well, perhaps I can shuffle the production board, the schedule,
Mhm.
and reschedule all of the fighting and action scenes that David has to do for weeks 6 and 7 of production and move up the drama. And we can put some sort of glove or something over the cast. And Roger, without missing a beat, because he was so brilliant, said, wonderful idea. Just make it look like a sword and sorcery glove. Put spikes on it. And if you look at the one sheet for the warrior and the sorceress, it's prominently featured as the sword and sorcery glove that David's character wore in the film. Okay. And I guess the reason that I wished to tell you that story is that it was trial by fire,
I love it.
meaning, having to think quickly on one's feet. And it taught me a lot. And my relationship with Roger was wonderful. And we did a total of 6 films in Argentina that he allowed me to be the producer on. And I also had the opportunity to work with someone who was very special, who unfortunately made headlines for the wrong reason um, a number of years after we had worked together in Argentina, and that's Lana Clarkson, who was the victim of Phil Spector.
Oh.
And Lana, was like a screen vixen at the time, and an ingenue who Roger gave the opportunity to be co-star in Deathstalker, and then in another film that we did, the female lead, because she had done such a great job in the first film, Deathstalker.
Mhm.
And that was the type of fellow that Roger was. He rewarded people who did good work for him with opportunities. So she became the star. And I was doing my second film with Lana, and I respected her enormously because she was such a hard worker and such a nice person, a really fine human being. And um, she loved returning to Argentina for the second film because she knew so many people that she had met during the first one, as I had.
Mhm.
And she fell in love with Buenos Aires and the culture and going to the Cologne Theater, which was the main opera house. And it's so interesting because at the time, she'd write me notes, okay, related to her work the next day and leave them under my door. But she would say things like, "Oh, I had the opportunity to go to the Cologne, and Frank, if you get that chance, you should take it because it's so extraordinary." Okay? And I kept all those notes, which was somewhat fortuitous because when I found out that, she had been murdered by Phil Spector, I felt so bad for her family, her mother and her sister. And so I went through all my archives at home and I found these notes that she had beautifully written in um, cursive about, just how much she loved Buenos Aires and how exciting it was to do certain things on these films and her appreciation. And I found some photos that were publicity photos that I had kept. And I wrote a letter to her mom telling her mom what a wonderful person her daughter was. And I said, I want you to have these notes that Lana wrote to me because they are a window into a really special part of her life when she was thriving and enjoying acting and being on location.
Mhm.
And I delivered that letter to the attorney that was representing the family. And when I introduced myself and told him what was in the envelope, he said, I'm going to be seeing her this weekend, and I really know that this is going to mean a lot because Phil Spector was trashing her at the time. They were trying to make her seem like she was a bad person and had a bad reputation, which was absolutely untrue. And I felt so badly for the family because she was such a delightful person to work with and a good quality human being.
Wow. That must have been really a difficult period.
Well, that was a number of years after I had been in Argentina.
Mhm.
And, it was, I think, challenging for her after, she finished working on the films with Roger Corman. Um, she was doing plays and things and, honing her craft. But it's very difficult for talent, as you know, to find consistency of work and to continue um, bettering their careers and, moving up the ladder.
Mhm.
It's a challenging business. And I believe she found that it was challenging for her in during that time. And so she made a mistake in uh, meeting Phil Spector, and well, so a sad, sad thing, but it was a nice friendship that I had with her. And again, it reinforces the whole notion that when you are working on a project together, you can establish a friendship that, continues. And she was a wonderful person.
Mm. Wow. And yeah, it's tough that you had such a beautiful time in Argentina working on those 6 films and had such a huge responsibility at such a young age, but then also have to remember that kind of not so happy ending. Yeah.
Well, how are we doing for time?
We're great. We're an hour 22 and we're just talking, enjoying.
Okay, good. I'm enjoying talking to you, although I feel like I'm dominating the conversation. So, at any point that you want to interject or pop in with a question,
Mhm.
I don't want to prevent you from doing that.
No, it's just you're giving us gold. I mean, to be in your 3rd film and to be an actual producer and to have your star break his hand and then have to reorganize the entire shooting schedule to put drama first and action at the end in the hope that this guy's fucking hand heals, and then you have to dress up the cast to be like some kind of special sorcerer's glove,
Yes.
and to have the wherewithal to go through all of that at 25 or 26 is insane.
What it's called is a war story.
Trial by fire.
Yes. But I must say, David
Mm.
was a trooper
Mhm.
and his hand did heal. We were able to complete principal photography, and we did reschedule the fight scenes, and the picture is not exactly what I would call a work of art. None of the films that I produced in Argentina were works of art. They were moneymakers
Mm.
because of the advent of the video cassette industry at the time. Films in the early '80s were just coming out on video cassettes. Blockbuster was just forming. Mom and pop video stores were cropping up all over the house, all over the, well, United States and world. And there was a demand for, quote, new releases, unquote. So even with these films that were done on micro budgets, under 600,000, $700,000 total, uh, Roger was able to release them in theaters, believe it or not, because he had the ability to do that with New World Pictures. So all these films that were ridiculous actually played in Westwood, Hollywood, on Hollywood Boulevard. They played on 42nd Street in New York. He bicycled the prints. He made a few prints and he bicycled them around the country. And he supported the release with newspaper advertising, TV spots.
Mm.
And the reason that he did that was to boost the visibility of the title so that the video cassette companies, which were Vestron and Media Home Entertainment at the time, would make big offers because they knew these films had had the visibility in the public's eye by virtue of these small releases, which, were money losers for Roger, but in the big picture, it helped to drive the video cassette minimum guarantees and the foreign sales because the foreign buyers said, "Oh, well, these films got theatrical distribution or in the United States, so they must be something."
It's incredible, how important that second release window is or was, for the home box office, for the videotape or the VHS releases, and then eventually, DVDs, Blu-rays, etc. Because it was like getting a second release on the same title.
Absolutely. I want to move on because
Hmm.
I want to walk through the balance of my career with you and this wonderful audience without spending quite as much time on my the next parts of my journey.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. So at a certain point, Roger um, wished to launch me from the nest in order to allow for someone else to have an opportunity. 6 movies is quite a lot over the period of 1983 to 1987. And so the tough love was him telling me, "Frank, I'm going to continue doing some films with Hector and Alejandro down in Buenos Aires, but I want to give Ginny an opportunity to go down and produce."
So he set you free.
So he, launched me from the nest and said, "It's time for you to fly." And I was then put in the position of figuring out, well, what am I going to do with this experience that I had in Argentina? And when am I going to get the opportunity to work in the United States again, and especially in Los Angeles?
Uh-huh.
Well, at the time, a new company was being formed called Shapiro Glickenhaus Entertainment by a gentleman named Lenny Shapiro in L.A., and a fellow named Jim Glickenhaus in New York, who was a fairly accomplished director, producer, had done some, films that had been very successful at the box office, and he was a talented guy. And they decided to form a production company that would, again, smartly make films a la what Roger was doing, but on larger budgets and take advantage of the home video and foreign sales and potentially television to release the films. And occasionally, if they had a gem, their strategy was to be able to put it out in theaters. So I had met Lenny Shapiro while I was working on the Beastmaster. Again, it's kind of full circle back to my first film where I had met someone who was at the time with a company called Avco Embassy that was interested in buying the Beastmaster for distribution. So Lenny remembered me. His other partner, Alan Solomon, remembered me because Alan actually worked for the executive producer of the Beastmaster. So it's the small world. And I went in for an interview and a second interview, and they hired me as the head of production for Shapiro Glickenhaus, overseeing their new slate of films, which was going to be imaginative and interesting slate, and with, emerging filmmakers and established filmmakers, and producing films that were funded by money that Jim Glickenhaus was able to place. And I started as their head of production, and it was a great opportunity. And we did some really interesting films that, believe it or not, have found a second life today. And I'll explain what I mean. So Jim was very good at finding talent and recognizing it, and he found a fellow named Frank Henenlotter and his partner Edgar Ivans, the producing partner. And Frank was a writer director based in New York, and had done two films previously that were cult classics in the horror comedy genre. One was called Brain Damage, and the other was called Basket Case. So Frank Henenlotter went to Jim and said, "Hey, listen, I've got a great idea for a new film, and I've written the script, and I would love for you, to take a look at it." And Jim said, "Well, what's the title?" And Frank said, "Frankenhooker."
Nice one.
Okay, so a great concept. Okay, um, a mad inventor, young inventor, decides he's going to give his girlfriend's father a birthday present. So he gives him a motorized, um, you know, lawnmower that is operated by remote control. So you can sit in your lawn chair and cut the grass with the lawnmower by remote control.
Mhm.
Well, on the night that he gives the gift, the lawnmower to his hopefully future father-in-law, um, his girlfriend happens to be standing in front of it when it's turned on, and she's run over by the lawnmower. Now, this, remember, is a horror comedy,
Horror
so
comedy, yep.
it's not, it's graphic, but in a humorous way.
Off camera.
Yes, exactly. When her body parts go flying everywhere, okay?
People are laughing.
And at that night, the grieving mad inventor whose fiance was run over by the lawnmower, collects all the body parts and puts them in a freezer. So you can imagine where it's going from there.
Right.
Okay. And he manages to find a way to fill in the missing body parts by collecting some more body parts. And then, through the wizardry of Dr. Frankenstein, puts together his girlfriend in the form of Frankenhooker.
Very nice.
Well, crazy
Mhm.
as it seems that a film like that could be made in the actually it was 1988, so but the late 80s,
Mhm.
and be successful because, it was so quirky and wacky. And from the creator of, Brain Damage and Basket Case comes Frankenhooker.
Mhm.
So, it played midnight screenings around town, like at the New Art where Rocky Horror Picture Show played. And it, got a little bit of a theatrical release, and then it did huge business on video cassette.
Mm.
Okay. Well, I learned about a year or two ago that the American Cinematheque in Los Angeles was going to screen Frankenhooker.
Holy shit, 2 years ago?
The American Cinematheque,
Wow.
okay,
Mm.
for Halloween. Well, the fellow who arranged the screening of Frankenhooker for the American Cinematheque, which is this group of cinephiles, as you know,
Mm.
happens also to be a curator at the Academy Library and Museum. So a few, maybe a month or two ago, there was a summer screening of Frankenhooker at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences Museum. And we found out about it, and some of my colleagues from back in the day attended and spoke afterwards or did a little bit of a Q&A.
Mhm.
And it served as the impetus for our company, Shapiro Glickenhaus, to have a reunion.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And we honored Lenny, and some of my colleagues have gone on to do amazing things. Kevin Tent, the editor of Frankenhooker and Basket Case, in a film that I produced with Jim Glickenhaus directing, who edited those films, um, has gone on to be an Academy Award nominated editor on some really impressive films.
And it all started with Frankenhooker.
Well, it all started with, the opportunity
Yeah.
to develop skills on a wacky movie entitled Frankenhooker
So
that
beautiful.
has become a cult classic.
Mm.
And there's another film that they did as a kind of back to back with Frankenhooker called Basket Case 2. And that was just also screened at the New Art for a midnight screening
Mhm.
just a couple weeks ago. And the chief special effects technician for prosthetics, Gabe Bartalos, attended that screening and spoke afterwards.
Mm.
So these films have developed like a long life that who knew
Mm.
these wacky Henenlotter movies were so well done in terms of what they were intended to be. And audiences today enjoy them and get them like the audiences of yesteryear.
It's amazing that 30, 40 years later, audiences can still connect with it in a meaningful way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's gratifying.
Mm.
Okay.
It just goes to show you that, like, when you make something with an inspired group of people, that stuff lasts forever.
Yes. So I spent 6 years with Shapiro Glickenhaus as their head of production.
Mm.
And Lenny Shapiro and Jim Glickenhaus were mentors to me.
Mhm.
They, I listened to all their phone conversations talking about release strategies on pictures and whether or not, they wanted to produce something and have me oversee it. And again, I was able to produce one of Jim's films, which was a great experience for me. And Universal was involved with that, financing it and in distribution of it. And so for me, it was a stepping stone opportunity. And Lenny is a bit of a legend as well in film sales, international sales. Everyone knows him, and in terms of running the company that he did, and we did some big films like Red Scorpion with Dolph Lundgren that we got behind and acquired for distribution and launched in the U.S. And it helped start the Shapiro Glickenhaus Entertainment Video Company,
Mhm.
which it was Shapiro Glickenhaus Entertainment Video that released Frankenhooker and Basket Case and other titles that, have since become these cult classics. And I learned a lot from Lenny and Jim, and
Mm.
I'm grateful to them. And Lenny and I and Jim are still in contact today. And that, again, is a really nice outcome when you develop a long-lasting friendship or relationship that is so beneficial and important in your life.
What a beautiful 12 years, 6 years in Argentina and then 6 years working for Shapiro and Glickenheim.
Glickenhaus.
Yeah, Glickenhaus.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay. So I moved on from Shapiro Glickenhaus, and these two rascals, George and Les, said, Frank, we can put you in touch with somebody over at Savoy Pictures, which is a new company. And our producer on our movies, because George and Les went on to have great careers. They are really impressive guys. And Les did directed Encino Man and then Miracle on 34th Street and Flubber, and he just, really developed a career as a director. These are the guys that I sneaked into the studios with.
I just wanted to make that connection. You're USC buddies.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and George was his producer on Encino Man and partners in the development of their company, and these guys single-handedly invented the electronic press kit.
Mm.
Okay, so they knew that someone who was on at Savoy Pictures, and I went over to just have a meeting because I was looking for my next gig after Shapiro Glickenhaus. And there was Frank Price had a company there with Savoy. He was the former head of production for Columbia for many years and well regarded in the business. And another fellow named Ray Stark was friends with Frank Price. Ray Stark produced Funny Girl. Um, he produced Annie,
Oh, wow.
all these great films. And I believe The Way We Were. So Ray was involved with this new project that Savoy was financing called Dr. Jekyll and Ms. Hyde, a comedy horror based on the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde films, but with a funny twist to it. And to star Tim Daly, a amazing actor, primarily known for the television series Wings, and Sean Young, who had been in a lot of films that were successful. So she was well known, and the film was going to shoot in Montreal. Well, the fellow that I went over to meet introduced me to Alan Greisman, who at the time, I believe, was married to Sally Field and had been a big-time producer on films like Fletch with Chevy Chase.
Legendary.
And I had a great meeting with Alan, and Alan said, "Hey, listen, we want somebody to come on as a consultant to take a look at the budget and help us with the production plan so we know we're making it as, efficiently as possible." So they brought me on as a well-compensated consultant on this film, and I was having the opportunity to interact with Ray Stark, this legendary producer, on this film that was, being set up in Montreal. Well, long story short, things didn't work out with the line producer that they had hired, so they said to me, "Would you like to go up and replace so and so and take over as the co-producer on Dr. Jekyll and Ms. Hyde," which was being done on a more substantial budget than I had worked on before, and it was great opportunity. So I said, "Of course." So my wife, Christy, was in her third trimester,
Oh, no.
and I have to go to Montreal
Yeah.
to miss her entire third trimester when she needs me.
Yeah. For months.
Yeah. Oh, darn.
Yeah.
Well, the nice thing is she recognized the opportunity and she encouraged me to take the job and said, "I'll come visit you."
Mm.
Okay. The doctor says I can travel.
You didn't want your first child born in Canada as a Canadian?
I love Canadians. That's why I'm enjoying being with you and having gotten to know you. But be that as it may, Dr. Jekyll and Ms. Hyde, you know, entertaining film. It finished well and it was released and, it got some good laughs and it was a great experience. And again, a stepping stone for me. And it all circles back to what we've been discussing, which is the importance of relationships. So it was because of George and Les that I went over to see Hilton Green, who then introduced me to Alan Greisman, who introduced me to Ray Stark. And had it not been for George and Les, I wouldn't have gone over for the initial meeting. Okay. Well, after I finished that film, George and Les had a relationship with the Disney folks because they were so prolific and um, in working with Disney on Encino Man and then some remakes of classic library titles like The Computer Who Wore Tennis Shoes and Love Bug. And they were going to do a sequel to Encino Man entitled Encino Woman for ABC Disney that who were just emerging at the time. And George said, "Hey, Frank, would love to have you come on and be a co-executive producer." So I did. And that's the only time that George and Les and I had the opportunity to work together. But we had fun. And the director was this great lady named Shawn Cheps, and she did a fine job. And it was an entertaining film. And I think both ABC and Disney were happy with it. But the point is, again, a relationship that I formed in college turned into an opportunity to co-executive produce a TV movie for the first time. I had never done that. And to work with the folks at Disney.
20 years later.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay, so I finished that, and a friend of mine named Lloyd Segan, who I had become very good friends with at Allegheny, of all places, not USC. He had, at my encouragement, come out to visit me while I was at USC, and he said, "Oh, I've got to move out to LA when I get out of Allegheny," because
Forget Pennsylvania.
he also had a father who was an attorney that probably would have preferred for him to follow in his footsteps. But Lloyd was um, committed to starting a career, and he has developed the most sensational career. He produced a film with Jeff Bridges called Blown Away. He did a film called Judgment Night. He um, uh, has had an amazing career in television with series that he and his partner, the Pillars, have created together, including The Dead Zone and Wildfire. And Lloyd knew that there was a company called Largo, which was a company that he had worked with before as a producer, but which was in its second iteration, that needed a head of production. And so Lloyd made the introduction to a fellow named Bar Potter, who had me come in for an interview. And Bar liked me and said, "Yes, we'd like you to come on and be our head of production for Largo, and we're going to do films with Ridley and Tony Scott." At the time, they intended to work with Tony, although that never happened. But they did. We did do two films, White Squall and G.I. Jane, with Ridley Scott. And I got to meet and work with Ridley, and he was just such a gentleman and so talented, as everyone knows. And the Zannicks, Richard and Lily Finney Zanuck, who Richard Zanuck ran 20th Century Fox and did a film called Mulholland Falls with Nick Nolte for Largo. Paul Schrader, fine filmmaker, wrote and directed Affliction. Nick Nolte was nominated for Best Actor. James Coburn won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. And this was a slate of films that I was given the opportunity to, oversee on behalf of Largo. And again, Bar Potter and Peter Elson, the guys who ran Largo, were mentors to me. and I learned so much from them, and it was an important stepping stone jump to a new stepping stone in my career, and I felt very fortunate for the 4 years that I worked for Largo. But production companies have, challenges. There's a lot of overhead to run a production company
Mhm.
and a foreign sales company, which Largo was doing its own foreign sales with Peter as the head. And at a certain point, the company that owned Largo, oh, which was JVC Electronics, decided, hey, it's just not worth the investment. We're not losing money. We're making money. We have a library of films, but it's just not something we're interested in doing anymore. So they pulled the pin on Largo, and I needed to move on. At the time, my wife and I were having, um, well, actually, we had just had our second, our son Andrew, and the kids were toddlers.
Mhm.
And I had to make a decision because now I'm, in my very early 40s, and I'm faced with, well, do I go back to being a producer and having to travel on location for long periods of time and be away from my family?
Missing your kids grow up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or do I look for something where I can utilize my skills and stay involved in the film industry, but be based in LA? And someone that I had worked with at Shapiro Glickenhaus remembered me, and she had become the head of production for what is known as a completion bond company.
Mm.
This is the year 2000, the turn of, you know, the new decade,
.com bubble.
amongst other things.
Right.
Okay. Well, so Joan Weidman was now at a company called International Film Guarantors, which was one of the leading completion guarantors in the film industry. Let me explain quickly what a completion bond is.
Because a lot of the audience is getting this for the first time.
Right.
Yeah.
It's simple when you think about it in the analogy of building a bridge. Okay. And this is where the concept for completion bonds first originated. So, building a bridge over a huge expanse is a challenging process. And sometimes bridges are financed on the basis that they will then charge tolls to go across them. And that's how they're going to recover the cost of building the bridge. And banks and whatnot loan money on the promise that they're going to recover eventually through the tolls that are charged. Well, if you're wrong in estimating the cost of building the bridge, you might find yourself in a situation where you've built half the bridge and you don't have the money to complete the second half of the bridge. Making a film is very similar. What happens if you're wrong in the preparation of the shooting budget and the shooting schedule and the post-production calendar, and everything's taking longer than you thought?
Or you have your star break his hand.
Hopefully, you've paid for the cast insurance.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so making a film is a challenging proposition. And films, in the past, largely independent productions, meaning those not made by the studios, were financed by pre-sales, meaning the producer would take to the film markets, such as Cannes and American Film Market, and at the time, back in the day, MeFed, and they would take a script and a director attached, and maybe a star or two who were committed to making the film if it were financed. And they'd pre-sell around the world on the basis of those materials and elements attached. And then maybe raise the balance of the money necessary to make the film through equity.
Mm.
These days, there's another component called tax incentives, and that's all part of the finance plan today. It wasn't so much back then, but banks would loan against the collateral being the pre-sales.
Mm.
They knew because they were entertainment banks and lenders who had experience and knew who the reputable buyers of films around the world were, that they could count on the pre-sales to pay back their loan and build in an interest reserve. And that's how the banks make money, is through the interest reserve, and they will loan against the collateral. But they don't want to be in a position like a bank that's loaning to build a bridge and find out that the second half of the bridge, or in the case of the film industry, the movie cannot be completed because the producer has run out of money. So they want to have what is called a completion guarantee. And a completion guarantee ensures that a film is going to be produced in accordance with the bonded screenplay, meaning everything that's in the script is going to end up on the screen, because the distributors who have pre-bought the film are buying from what's in the script. And so you have to shoot the script or the buyers don't have to take the film.
Mm.
So it's got to conform to the script and be produced within the resources of the schedule and the budget. And they they want a completion guarantee before they're going to loan any money. So the bond has to close, which means we have to be satisfied that the film can, in fact, be made on the resources presented to us, and that the director and the producer and the key department heads are all aware that it's a bonded film and that they have to work within those resources, because we're ultimately responsible for a if it's going over budget, putting in the money necessary to complete the film, because the bank doesn't want to overloan if they don't have the collateral to do so. So they expect us to do that, or they expect us to correct the problems that are causing the film to potentially go over budget or go over schedule. So we have a lot of responsibility and we also have a lot of authority. And we don't want to have to use our authority. Rather, we want to vet the project carefully and know that it can be completed and that the filmmakers can complete it within the resources and get it right in the vetting stage and during pre-production. So that by the time we close the bond, we know there's a solid production plan, and we know that the personnel, the producer, the line producer, the production accountant, the director especially, okay, are well equipped and well prepared to shoot the number of shooting days and not exceed at that, and work within the line item budgets
Mm.
that comprise the master budget.
So many steps to like mitigate risk.
Mitigating risk is a perfect way of describing it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I read the scripts and look at the schedules and look at the budgets and the post production plans with our post production executives. And there are other production executives who are with the current company that I'm with, which is no longer International Film Guarantors, because International Film Guarantors was acquired in 2013 by Film Finances. So I was offered the opportunity in 2013 to join Film Finances, and I took the offer And I am delighted to say that my colleagues at Film Finances are the finest people I've ever had the chance to work with. They're just top tier industry professionals and really great people. And any experience that we have in life, whether it's professional or personal, is largely dependent upon the people that we are working with or surrounded by in the case of personal relationships. And the experience that I have had since joining Film Finances has been outstanding, and I've been very fortunate. So, if I started with international film guarantors in 2000 and we're now in 2025, I have been working in this completion bond space for 25 years. I've had the opportunity to work on films such as Iron Man, Iron Man 2, The Incredible Hulk, which were all Marvel films made before Marvel was acquired by Disney, and they needed completion bonds for their facility, and we started at IFG with them, and it was just a great opportunity. I've worked on films such as The Aviator that starred Leonardo DiCaprio, a film called The Good Shepherd that Matt Damon starred in, and Robert De Niro directed. The Dolphin Tale films, the first and its sequel, with a fine company called Alcon Entertainment that produced other films such as Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, and they did a film called The Blind Side, which was awesome.
Oscar winner.
Oh, yeah.
For Sandra Bullock.
Yes. Okay. So what working for IFG and now Film Finances has afforded for me is the ability to work with and opportunity to work with top tier people in the business. And we're an important part of it because without the completion bonds, the financing might not be made available. But it's the filmmakers like Denis Villeneuve, okay? Michael Sarnowski, who I worked with recently on, well, first Pig, and now on a film that he's in post-production on called Death of Robin Hood that stars Hugh Jackman.
Oh.
Amazing filmmaker, talented, a writer, a director, a visionary. And I've also had the opportunity to work with great producers such as Cassian Elway, who I just, have the highest respect and admiration for. And he's in post-production delivery, actually, on a film entitled Dead Man's Wire that you've got to see when it comes out, Ryan, because it stars Bill Skarsgård, who I think his performance is Oscar worthy. And so Cassian has done a series of films that we have guaranteed at Film Finances, and he's always been such a gentleman and such a pleasure to work with. And the reason that I'm naming these names and naming these titles is because there's been, such a great um, privilege for me to work on these films with these talented filmmakers and really fine people and, to get to know them and to um, understand the challenges that they face and to help them find potentially solutions or to, see them find the solutions under our, watch, meaning we need to know that they can troubleshoot and that they're willing to allow us to help troubleshoot. But when you develop a collaboration like that, it's really a pleasure. And that is what the past 25 years has been for me. Um, Collaborative pleasure in working with these top-notch filmmakers on a whole range of projects from budgets of, $3 million on up to 200 million. And I've had the opportunity to work on some interesting documentaries. Netflix, when it first started producing, um, wanted to have completion guarantees. So at Film Finances, we provided the bonds for Making a Murderer,
Hmm.
um, and Chef's Table and Our Planet.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And so to, you know, work on these films has been a labor of love. And I just feel very fortunate.
It's so amazing. It almost feels like just laying out the story of your career. It seems like you're in such a great place to understand if a film will go off as scheduled and on budget, because if you can do it for 6 films in Argentina, where your star gets breaks his hand, and then you can move into working now in the United States and doing that 6 years, with the US based production company, Shapiro and,
Shapiro
Glickenhaus.
Glickenhaus
Glickenhaus. That one always gets me.
and in Largo.
And in Largo, and now you're kind of in this wonderful position where you get to oversee all of this and help people troubleshoot before they get into trouble so that they can get the money that they need to get.
And I think you're onto something there that I have, that has occurred to me, which is that and some of my other colleagues at Film Finances have had that benefit of being on the other side
Yeah.
of the table, meaning as producers or in some production capacity and or as a head of production.
Mhm.
So I understand what these line producers and production people that are so skilled are going through.
Mm.
And I think because of my background and experience, I'm able to help and to provide some advice from time to time and guidance and establish a nice communication and trust. And that's really a big part of what we do. We need to establish relationships, and we want those relationships to go well. We want them to be successful and to be recurring. Working with people um, on a project that, could be challenging, but we get through and it's a team effort and a relationship is formed. And then moving on to the next one we work on together where we have a shorthand because of the experience.
Mhm.
And again, it takes a village to make a movie,
That's for sure, yes.
and it is a real um, collaborative process. And having good people skills on both sides of the table where there can be, you know, com- communication that's timely and accurate, and someone feels the confidence to pick up the phone and call Frank and say, Frank, this is what's going on. It's a bit of a kerfuffle right now, but we're figuring it out. And we want to make you aware of it now rather than later. That's what I want and expect, and in the really fine relationships that I've developed with people, it's a two-way street of communication, and it's candid, and it's a really nice experience.
I bet, and you must, I mean, at this stage in your career with everything you've seen, and I say that in the greatest admiration, there must be nothing that surprises you anymore. Like, I'm sure you've seen every production problem or every production delay known to man, and people just must call you and be like, "Frank, what do I do?"
Well, that is accurate, but not completely true.
Mhm.
Okay. There's always new situations that arise. And that's what's, interesting about it is each project has its own unique set of challenges. Okay. Perhaps related to the location, perhaps related to weather, maybe because of the things that are required on set related to stunts or special effects or, you know, there's always the challenges, there's always the unexpected,
Hmm.
and there are things that you cannot forecast which occur. But again, that's what makes my job so interesting and why I've felt so content doing it for the past 25 years.
Mm. It seems like from the young age of 23, 24, working on Beastmaster, it seems like you it almost seems like you've had the same job the whole time. You're problem solving, you're troubleshooting, you're producing, you're working with the producers, you're working with the directors. Like it seems kind of like you've almost it seems like a perfect continuation of your previous roles, doing the film finance and the completion bonds. I'm just wondering if at any time in that whole experience you were ever tempted to get more into the creative process and actually write something or be tempted to direct something, or because it feels like from what you've told me, and obviously you haven't told me the entire story, we've glazed over an illustrious career in just an hour and a bit, but like did you ever get tempted to like try to direct or try to write, or were you just super happy producing and helping, using your experience to facilitate the film and to make sure it gets out on budget and on time?
It's a good question. And w- at a certain point in my career, when I was in between companies, I did write a script
Oh, okay, great.
and I did find a agent who was interested in um, helping to set up the project. And we got it out to some top tier people, including Drew Barrymore,
Right.
who I had actually written the lead character for when I was in the process of, putting pen to paper. And she and her partner at the time, a lady named Nancy Juvonen, read the script and they liked it. And then came along Charlie's Angels.
Oh yeah, took the thunder away.
Well, it took Drew away.
Yeah.
And she lost her, interest in my little script, and she catapulted to major stardom.
Mm,
And, what a wonderful career she's had. And my script never got made,
mm,
but it was a wonderful process for me to write a script and to see that some people who were substantial in the business took it seriously.
yeah.
Yeah. Now,
Validation.
you had on your show, podcast, this week, Bianca and Delora Foscht,
Yeah.
the Foscht twins,
What an inspiring group.
because I introduced you to them
Mhm.
and I asked you because they have a film that's out right now entitled Day of a Lion, which everyone should see
Mm,
on Amazon or Prime Video and Apple. Um, I have established a really nice working relationship with these two 24-year-old creative dynamos
mhm,
who write, direct, produce, star in their own films.
mhm.
And I was so impressed when I read about Day of a Lion in Deadline Hollywood Daily. And then they invited me to see the film. My wife and I went to the screening and we were blown away by what they accomplished on a shoestring budget.
Yes.
And we followed that up with a meeting and they told me about their next project, which is entitled Oma, and which I think has great potential. It's very original. And so I'm finding that with the blessing of my colleagues at Film Finances, I'm able to dabble a little bit now in the creative. And I'm working with Bianca and Delara on hopefully setting up OMA. There's no sure thing. It's a very difficult process to find financing and to find um, cast that's meaningful, that can help to cause a financier to want to back a film. But I'm enjoying the process of working with these young filmmakers,
Mhm.
lending to them some of my experience and knowledge, and seeing what energy they have and their creative talent. It just is awe-inspiring for me, that they did it all on this last film they produced, and now they're ready to do it again. And I hope that we're able to collaborate in a meaningful way in order to make that happen.
Yeah.
I'm also working on some documentaries with a partner named Zach Marion and his partner, Emma Cragen. And we produced a film called Where She Lies that is a documentary that was picked up by Gravitas Ventures a few years ago. It's a nice documentary that tells a very compelling story, and it was a great experience working with Zach and Emma on that as their producing partner. And so we are well into production on a new film that is a documentary. And again, they're younger filmmakers than me. I met Emma through her father, the legendary music producer Ken Cragen, who I established a friendship with. Ken was one of the forces behind USA for Africa and We Are the World.
Okay.
And you should see the documentary that ran on Netflix recently called The Greatest Night of Pop. And it details the whole story behind how Ken and Quincy Jones and Harry Belafonte um, put together USA for Africa and the recording of We Are the World in one night with all these amazing artists, and created a song for the ages.
A movement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing that you're getting the chance to kind of mentor young talent. And the Foch twins specifically, you called it right. You called them dynamos, and they absolutely are. I mean, like creativity just oozes out of every pore in their bodies. They're writing, they're so energetic, they're so passionate about what they're doing. And I think it's great that you can be a shoulder to lean on and to help them navigate such a challenging industry.
Yeah. So they are that
Mm.
creative dynamos, but they're also amazing young women and human beings, and they're brilliant. So I'm having fun working on their project and with them, and hopefully we will get the film made. But you just never know; it's tough out there.
It is, yeah, and things are changing a lot, but also too, I think maybe now, now we need some younger voices and some new voices directing and championing films, right? And maybe this is with the studios having difficulties and with the streamers changing the way the business is, maybe now there's enough cracks in the system where new voices can kind of come through and get enough sunlight to like grow and develop.
From your lips to his or her ears.
Yeah, someone up there, please listen. Yeah, someone I was reading the other day, like someone reckoned this period of time that we're in right now to like the 1970s, when the studio systems really changed, and a lot of young filmmakers came to the fore, and George Lucas was one of them, and this is maybe happening again, where maybe someone in their early 20s or is going to come through with a breakthrough.
I hope you're right. I believe there's that potential and opportunity. And, it's a very interesting time. The film industry, the one that I have so lovingly described and spoken of over my 44 years in it, is finding itself as a result of what happened during COVID
Yeah.
and the fact that people stopped going to movie theaters and started relying upon the streamers. And of course, creators and influencers on YouTube and on TikTok and across the platforms, attract young people to their content.
Hmm.
Okay. And I understand that and I embrace it. I still believe there's a home and a need for long form content in the form of motion pictures and um, episodic television that's compelling and interesting. And, the streamers are doing some, and HBO for that matter, are doing some great work. And White Lotus, for example, is brilliant. And other shows that are finding their place on streamers that allow for binge watching,
Hmm.
which is a lot of fun. My wife loves to do that,
Yeah.
and daughter and son, and there's a lot of great content being created. It's just that the business has changed, and the dynamics and economics of it um, are different than what they used to be. But it's a great business, and it's one that I feel privileged to have been part of.
Yeah. And just a short 44-year career that's still going strong. I remember I was lucky enough, you invited me to your office a couple months ago, and I just want to throw this out there. And walking through your office was spectacular because you just had movie posters on all the walls, and it's just like, oh my God, like you guys are like the engines of Hollywood, like you help these creative people get their their projects on the right track so that they can get the money they need to tell their stories. That's kind of how I see you. Like just on a layman's kind of term, like you do the completion bonds, but you're also there to coach them, to help them to navigate this challenging landscape. But at the end of the day, you help them get everything in track so that they can get the money they need to tell their stories. And I
Yeah.
think that's the most amazing thing in the world.
Well, right back to you. I, during our lunch, learned about what you do and have done in China
Yeah.
and around the world, and tough rides, and how you put that together, and your great crew that you work with, and the w- amazing treks that you make across vast expanses, and meet interesting people, and run into your own um, issues and problems and challenges that you have to solve
Yeah.
is fascinating. And so, while you recognize the nice experience that I'm having, I certainly see that in you, Ryan Pyle. And urge you to keep going and doing exciting things and creating great content, because you're a talented guy, and you have such an interesting background.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
I listened carefully when we were at lunch,
Yeah.
and to your stories about basketball and growing up in, the Toronto area, and
Yeah.
your great family. And it's really been a pleasure meeting you and appearing on your podcast.
Which I very much appreciate.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
All right.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to put out into the space? I mean, we went through a lot, but is there anything that you want to leave this with?
I could go on for hours, but I'm afraid your audience would not. And I really appreciate everyone that has taken the time to listen. And you explained to me that the nice thing about a podcast is it doesn't have to be all at once,
Mhm.
and it can be done in segments.
Mhm.
And I hope that what I have conveyed to you, which ultimately is conveyed for the benefit and the pleasure of the audience, has resonated in one way or another, because we're all in this together to learn
Mhm.
and to experience and to communicate. And so this has been fantastic.
Well, I think there's a lot of young students that are heading into the winter in Pennsylvania right now who are looking for Southern California and thinking that they might follow in your footsteps.
Hoping to parachute out.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, look, Frank, thank you so much for coming on. And if there's anything we can ever do to get you back on, please let me know.
My pleasure. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Take care.
Bye.
And we fade to black.